Welcome to the Fantasy NASCAR podcast. I am at Race for the Prize. Let's take an early look at the Xfinity race for Martinsville 2024. But first, remember, racefortheprize.com. That's where you can get access to the Fantasy NASCAR spreadsheet. $30 for all of the races. Cup, Xfinity trucks. In April, just Venmo, PayPal, Cash App that money over to me, throw it in the kitty, and then I'll give you access to the spreadsheet. Last year, you got Allgaier winning. One thing I'll quickly point out is that Martinsville is chaos in the Xfinity series. Martinsville is chaos in the truck series. I will break that down further, but if you're short on time, expect cautions, expect very few green flag laps, which can affect your hog or dominators. But more importantly, you might notice that the hog or dominators doesn't always win this race. Now, if you look here, Sammy Smith does end up finishing third and leading, running fast laps. But if you go back over here to Brandon Jones, 2022 fall, Brandon Jones, 2022 fall, you come back up here to Allgaier, race winner, only scores 11 hog points or dominator points. We're going to have plenty of lead changes, at least in the Xfinity series, where there are cautions, cycles, restarts, you name it, short stints, long stints. You're still going to have a hog. You're still going to have a dominator. And we'll break that down later in the podcast, but I just want to point that out. Anyway, so what we'll do here at the beginning is just look at who has been running well at Martinsville, and we'll sort it based on last year's results. Allgaier with the win, some solid top fives. And then if we look at what he's done this season, 7th best driver rating at Las Vegas, we're looking at that. 3rd best driver rating at Phoenix, we're looking at that. 11th best at Richmond, although you can make a strong argument that he ran a little bit better. We will break down the Richmond laps later in the podcast. So everything is there, but does he have the speed that the JGR Toyotas have? No. Creed with 2 second-place finishes at Martinsville over the last 3 races. He's in a JGR Toyota, basically the only JGR Toyota that can't do anything, surprisingly. Everybody else is, even Taylor Gray jumping into a car rando. Although we love Taylor Gray, we think he is a hot prospect. Eric Almirola jumping into a cold seat. Unbelievable. Creed there every single week working with his team and just doing nothing. But if Creed can turn it around, this would be the week to do it. Did run well at Phoenix. Sammy Smith has been awesome last year, but Sammy Smith is no longer in a JGR Toyota. He's shifting over to a new team. And oh, by the way, who was his crew chief during these races where he led 67 laps or scored 67 hog points? It was also the same place where Brandon Jones scored 40 hog points. It was none other than Jeff Mendring, who is now your crew chief for Chandler Smith, who has won at the races that we are most concerned with. We'll get to Chandler Smith in a second. Herbst, 4th, 3rd, 6th, 10th. Very good, very solid. Similar to the Allgaier situation, we can make an argument that Herbst was better than the 13th rated driver at Richmond. Was he better than the JGR Toyotas? No, but given the way that Martinsville can play out, you're in the top 5, like we have seen with Allgaier up here. He didn't have the best race car. But given the situation of all these cautions we get at the end, all the hairiness we get at the end of a Martinsville race, even in the truck series, we get guys who pull one out of their hat. Herbst is going to be right there. He's in the hat. Will his name get pulled? I don't know, but at least he's in the hat. Parker Retzlaff, been very good at Martinsville. Solid equipment, probably the best ride he's ever had with Jordan Anderson. Also has been good at Richmond in the past. The short tracks seem to be one of his strengths. Again, another strong argument could be made that he was better than his finish. We'll talk more about that later. We do know that he won the pole. Jordan Anderson is definitely moving forward. 12th for Sieg in 2022. And then these 23rd place finishes, very strong. Anthony Alfredo, 8th last year finish. Now, again, some of these finishes might be inflated because, again, Martinsville is crazy. But it's going to be crazy again, so just count on it. Alfredo's fine, has worst race last week when he had a brake failure. Break that down later. Jeb Burton typically runs well at Richmond, typically runs well at Martinsville, but he did not run well last week. So that is a little disappointing, a little bit of a concern. Kligerman just gets you top 10s. Look at these numbers, driver rating wise. 10th at Las Vegas, 13th at Phoenix, 7th last week, maybe slightly inflated, but either way, pretty good for Big Machine. And if I'm not mistaken, Big Machine put a rando in the optimal lineup a couple seasons ago. I don't know if we'll get to the optimals in this podcast, but if we do, we'll look at who was that rando for Big Machine. Josh Williams, top 15 for Gosselin. Better car. He is now starting to get in the groove with Colleague. Everything is seeming all right. Is he elite? No, but as long as Williams' price tag is not prohibitive, then we can continue to consider him as a 10th to 15th place driver. Inside the top 10 is probably pushing it. Brandon Jones, always been an excellent driver at this track. Now, as I mentioned before, he definitely benefited from Jeff Mendring being an excellent crew chief at Martinsville, so there could be a step back. Had a wreck last week, but overall, just kind of a ho-hum Brandon Jones year. I wouldn't really count on him unless, for whatever reason, he comes in at a significant discount. Clements, just your typical 15th to 20th place driver over the years, sometimes a little bit worse, never much better. And you can see that in his driver rating this year. Like, oh, you said 15th to 20th place driver. Well, I'm seeing 20s on here. Yes, that is his driver rating, which is very similar to an average running position. And from these, mid-pack drivers, and he's not even at the top of the mid-pack, from the top or the middle of the mid-pack, I would put him. That's where they run. And then through attrition and situation, they pick up 4 or 5 more spots, and they turn a 21 into a 17. And that's definitely expected at Martinsville. Hang on to the lead lap. People are going to wreck. People are going to do stuff stupid. You might even play a little bit of strategy and take 10 spots. But that's kind of the thing that we bake in. Your average running position plus 4 or 5. That's where you're going to typically finish. And you'll see that if you pour through the numbers. Cole Custer, not really that bullish on Custer this year. The JGR Toyotas just got him. They're just faster than him. And, he really wasn't that great last season either. The field in the Xfinity Series is tougher this year. Everyone has kind of stepped their game up. And Cole Custer didn't. Cole Custer beat probably a softer field last season. And he really had to do it with a win at the end. Probably shouldn't. Like, he wasn't the guy winning every week. He wasn't dominating the 2023 Xfinity Series. He gets the crown at the end, and that makes him look like, oh, Cole Custer's the guy to get behind. It wasn't really the case in 2023. And so far in 2024, there's no crown to be seen. Austin Hill's just out there doing Austin Hill type things. Probably could have won this race last season, had that eventful ending. You look at his driver rating, this guy just goes out there and runs top 5. Is he leading a lot of laps at short tracks? Not really. Can he lead laps at intermediate tracks? Yeah. Will he improve at short tracks? Absolutely. Is the car fast? Yes. But he just goes about his business, top 5 and having a great season. Not as fast as the JGR Toyotas. Wouldn't rule him out, but wouldn't rule him in either. Blaine Perkins, as I've mentioned time and time again, very good short flat track racer, except for last week. But last week, he wasn't able to finish the race. I believe his Sieg car had a mechanical failure. Rough day for Sieg across the board. I don't know if the cars lacked speed. They did have speed. There were situations that unfolded. Clearly, Perkins had some sort of mechanical issue. I haven't been able to find on Twitter exactly what happened. It wasn't in the racing notes, but you can see that he's just in the back the entire time and then doesn't run all the laps. So maybe we can push that to the side. Either way, he's had good results at Martinsville. This is a little bit better equipment, obviously, but he's also had good Phoenix results in the past. Worth a peek, especially if you're getting him at like $4,600 starting in the back. Ellis, Mayer, did he ever get a truck? I remember he led some laps in the truck series in his debut. He's had some pretty strong runs early in his career at Martinsville. He might even have one back in 2019 as well. Not getting the finishes at Martinsville last season, not getting the finishes at anywhere this season. It's kind of rough. The car has speed. He's fine, just he can't put together a race. And why am I going to pay for a guy that can't put together a race at the moment? I don't know if we need to break down any of these other guys. Obviously, here's Chandler Smith way down here. But highest rated driver at Phoenix, highest rated driver at Richmond. Jeff Mendering is his crew chief. Seems like a smash him in Chandler Smith type of weekend. We'll see him practice. I don't know how much he loves this track or not. Jesse Love having a pretty good year, right up there. Seeming to be a much better driver than Sheldon Creed. Smart move by Richard Childress. Eric Almirola in the field. Almirola better than Smith last week, doesn't get the win. Very experienced, has been running really well at the Cup Series at Martinsville over the last couple seasons. As we know, Stewart Haas Racing Fords were really strong with the short flat tracks, and Almirola was right there dicing it up. Him and Smith are going to be two drivers that everyone is going to love, and rightfully so. You loved them last week, you're going to love them again. They'll set up fast, they'll qualify up front. As long as they avoid some silliness, they should be fine. But again, it can't be understated that this race is pretty chaotic. We'll break that down in a second. Allmendinger, another guy you could argue it's been good at short flat tracks. I just don't think that Kaulig really has the cars. It seems like at this moment they're spread a little thin. They're not as financially invested as they once were. Obviously we can't see their books, but we can only just judge Kaulig through our eyes. And we look at Kaulig in the Cup Series, and we look at their performance in the Xfinity Series, and it leaves a lot to be desired. They'll be fine at the road courses. They'll be fine at the plate tracks. But the days of A.J. Allmendinger winning intermediate tracks or winning at Bristol, those are not happening. Corey Heim has really stepped up in this Sam Hunt car. Look at that. 4th highest driver rating at Richmond. He'll be running double duty. He's absolutely the best driver at the moment in the truck series. Toyota seems to be really behind this kid. The Tricon trucks are fast in the truck series. Heim looks great everywhere. It's taken him a little while to develop, not that long. He was an ARCA legend. Now that he is the guy in the seat in the truck series for Toyota, he's looking good. And it seems like TRD is also putting some pretty good resources into Sam Hunt when he is behind the wheel. He's going to get a lot of laps at Martinsville this week. It'll be interesting to see what he can do. Had a really good week last week. Benedetto's going to be back. Plenty of experience. The car was just okay last week. We expected a lot more from Sieg at Richmond. We didn't Sieg it. But then again, Benedetto was fine for his first race, cold coming into Richmond. Jump in, morning practice, go race. What did we really expect from Matt Benedetto? Kyle Sieg did exactly what you were expecting him to do, right around the 20th place. Ryan Sieg had a borderline top 10 car before he wrecked, and then Perkins had a mechanical issue. So really, it can all be explained why Sieg wasn't as fast as we expected. And in reality, you got to step back. What did we expect? All 4 Sieg cars to get a top 15? That's a pretty unreasonable expectation. There's really no reason to downgrade Sieg heading into this week. They still are top of the mid-pack, maybe even a little bit better than that. Weatherman doing Weatherman things. He's fine. SVG, it'll be real interesting to see how he adapts to this track. He's not really passing anyone out there. He's just out there turning laps. If you're watching these races or going through, I believe I counted the other day, he made like 3 passes in one entire race. Again, not excited about Kaulig. Leland Honeyman having a pretty solid, safe season. Young has established himself as a solid mid-pack team, maybe even the top of the mid-pack. They're not quite fighting for 15s yet, but they're strongly putting out 20th place finishes every single week. Honeyman has been good. The team has been good. Pretty impressed so far. Logan Bearden had a pretty solid result last week for JD Motorsports, surprisingly, and ended up in the optimal lineup. Don't want to overreact to it, but we may want to bump Bearden up a little bit this week. If he can do it at Richmond and squeeze into the optimal lineup, then he definitely can this week. Smithley back with JD. Got a spot start last week. when Morgan Baird had a child, or his wife had a child, driving that beautiful long drink car. Smithley had speed, looked pretty good. Not a bad day. Goes back to the old school JD days with Smithley, back when he was running every week and he was Garrett 25thly, churning out 25th place finishes against some pretty solid Xfinity fields. JD Motorsports was funding the team a lot more back then. But either way, 21 in terms of driver rating. It's a pretty solid day, pretty good race car, especially considering he just jumped in cold and took it over. Cram, surprisingly, had a decent car for JD. So JD Motorsports on the up and up. Imagine they're going to roll those cars into Martinsville, have some speed, hang into the front, lead lap, expect all these cautions. JD Motorsports not typically in play at the intermediate tracks at least. This might be a week. Obviously, last week was a week where you could think about backing them. Obviously, Smithley wasn't in the optimal lineup, or wasn't even in the player pool. But this week, they're definitely going to be someone to consider. Joey Gase out there throwing bumpers. Yeah, we just don't really like the Gase equipment to begin with. Now the equipment's got to get fixed within a week. Probably not for me. Vargas looks like he'll be back in the start and park ride for, maybe it's going to be Mike Harmon. Maybe it'll be with Jordan Anderson. We shall see. It's got him listed on the entry list with Mike Harmon. So someone's parking. Haley Deegan, been a rough go. Very disappointing. I think I've got her name spelled wrong. I'm pretty sure I got her name spelled wrong. Yeah. Had to make some edits in the sheet. There we go. And last but definitely not least, we got Carson Kvapil jumping on here. Who's excited about this? Junior Motorsports, Carson Kvapil, son of Travis Kvapil, excellent late model racer. Him and his younger brother, I think he won the championship last year for the Cars Tour. I have to double check that. His brother's been really good. Carson's the next big thing. He'll have a full-time ride next year. We have seen him in limited runs in the Truck Series. He has definitely produced. You put him in a place like Martinsville in a junior motorsports car, you immediately get flashbacks of Josh Berry getting a part-time ride with Martinsville and winning the race. Is Quab winner in the race? I wouldn't rule it out. If there's a track where he can perform, it could be. And so, one of the things that I'll actually do is look, because we had that giant late model race at Virginia, the Virginia is for Lovers 300, and we'll see if Kvapil has ever raced the late models at Virginia. I've got to believe that he has raced at Martinsville. There's just no way that he hasn't. He finished third last season. He finished second last season. Had to take a pause break to Google up the Credit Union 300, Virginia's for Lovers 300s, a bunch of different names. This late model race is not on Racing Reference. I had to dig a little bit. So there it is. Yeah, he does have experience. He has been good at this racetrack. You look at before Barry had his breakthrough, he had a lot of success in that Virginia 300 late model race at Martinsville. Really got him ready. So, yeah, Kvapil definitely on the board. All right. Next on the podcast, what shall we discuss? Let's go over actual Dietrich data. We'll be quickly through here and get an idea who is running well this season. We can see in the spreadsheet, again, you can get the spreadsheet at racewithprize.com. $30 for the month of April. PayPal, Venmo, Cash App goes to a good cause. Me and my family. And we appreciate it. And we can see the laps run last year. Allgaier wins the race despite only running 50% inside the top 5. Again, it's a bit of a mercurial race. There's plenty of chaos. Something you're going to need to be aware of. Sammy Smith, very strong day up front all day. Herbst, pretty strong. 77% of the laps for Parker Revs Lab in the top 15. That's pretty good. I think we should look at this real quick, this Martinsville numbers, because we just looked at finishes from last year. Creed up there all day. Smith up there all day. Herbst up there all day. It'd be real interesting to see what Creed can do this week. We look at other guys that finished up front, right? This is the interesting part. So we look at Alfredo, who finished 8th. but that's a bit of an inflation. But again, that's what I said. Expect some inflation because there are a lot of cautions. We'll break that down in a second. Spoiler alert, the average green flag run is 13 laps. 13 laps. I might as well just say it now. All right, I'm going to quickly run through the last 8 races and the green flag runs. You ready? Starting with last fall. 9.7, 16.8, 12.7, 9.5, 13, 13.5, and then way back in 2020, they actually had a 17 green flag run. We're running hundreds of laps, but we're only running about 10 at a time. Then we're running a bunch of caution laps. So no fast laps. You do get laps led, but plenty of opportunities to go with differing tire strategies. And in the Xfinity series, because you're going to need tires a little bit more, there will be opportunities for wave arounds. That's going to keep at least some of the mid-pack drivers in the game. May not be able to bail out the bottom tier in the Xfinity series, but we're going to see pitting a little bit more. Maybe leaders come down a little bit more, and there might be an opportunity for more wave arounds. There's definitely going to be plenty of lucky dogs. So in the Xfinity series, the value has a better chance of coming through. Whereas in the truck series, you don't pit very often. You don't need tires very often. And that's definitely one way that you can get the lead at a track where it's hard to pass. And we've seen plenty of drivers in the past where I can't beat Kyle Busch, but my best chance is to stay out. Or I can't beat Todd Gilliland. I know it's a surprising thing to say, but you look at Todd Gilliland's numbers in the truck series at Martinsville, you look at his numbers in the Cup series, it's a pretty good track for him. You can't beat him, then you got to go with the track position play and do something different. And it's worked out for other guys. In the truck series, where tires don't matter much, but also when you're only running 10 green flag laps, your tires aren't wearing that much. You can get away with the gamble sometimes at Martinsville. Definitely in the truck series, not always the case in the Xfinity series. And if people don't pit, then there's not wave arounds, and that really buries the back pack, the bottom 10 in the truck series. There's a billion cautions, and you would think, all right, all these cautions, everyone's going to still finish on the lead lap. That's just not the case in the truck series. The back pack still finishes laps down because they don't get wave rounds. And typically, probably the same guy gets the lucky dog over and over. Back to this. So Alfredo definitely benefits from the clunkiness of the Martinsville race. Runs around 25th for most of the race, 57%, and then it gets the big boost at the end. Same thing for Burton. Kligerman also in that category. Same thing for Josh Williams. And then more deserving drivers don't necessarily get the finishes that they deserve, especially guys like Cole Custer, Austin Hill. So there's your Martinsville run through. But more importantly, we want to look at the Dietrich data, which is a lap-by-lap analysis of top 5, top 10, top 15, top 20, 25, 30, laps led. It's a big old number that does some math. And we rank them from 0 to 100. And for this, so this is their overall season-wide score, which I'm not really concerned with because I don't really need Daytona. I don't need Atlanta. I don't need Coda. Just show me Las Vegas, Phoenix, Richmond. And out of 100, we've got Chandler Smith pulling in a 0.98. I'm actually surprised that Allgaier is as close as he is. But remember one of the things I mentioned before, that Justin Allgaier, and this is one of the reasons why I created this data point, Justin Allgaier, according to driver rating, last week was 11th. Now, a lot of that is affected and skewed by a strategy called the end, which creates some laps that weren't the greatest. But there's a handful of drivers at Richmond last week who decided to save a set of tires, banking on another caution. That caution never came. And so those laps at the end of the race obviously resulted in a poor finish. But also those laps at the end of the race, in terms of driver rating or average running position, make Allgaier look like he didn't really have a competitive car, or at least not as competitive as it was. Through my data analysis, it says no, actually, he wasn't as fast as Chandler Smith, but he's pretty quick. He was running in the top 5 for the majority of that race. He looked pretty good. And so when you use my data and then you look at Phoenix and Las Vegas, Allgaier's there at number 2, which is pretty impressive because I know we love the JGR Toyotas, but then again, we got to remember that Eric Almirola, a little cold and rusty jumping at Las Vegas, moves forward at Phoenix, and then definitely clearly on top of his game at Richmond. So, going forward, I could easily slot Eric Almirola above Justin Allgaier, because Eric Almirola definitely was just adjusting to the new team. You're going to need a couple weeks. We saw some truck series. I was probably a little too quick to be down on Zane Smith running part-time for Bill McAnally. I didn't expect him to just jump in and out of a truck and be able to compete with the rest of the series regulars. McAnally has fast trucks, but Zane Smith in the past had really fast truck with Front Row Motorsports. He was with his team every single week for several seasons. They were very well connected. I feared that, in and out part-time is not going to work. But what we saw was after a race or two, he really started to establish himself. Well, really race two, connects with the team, seems to be simpatico. They are in sync. They're good. The same thing with Eric Almirola. The more reps he gets with his team, the better they're going to get. Riley Herbst right up here with an 89. Cole Custer with an 88. So, yeah, he's a top 5 driver. But there's a significant margin between Chandler Smith and Cole Custer. We can see that in the stat sheets in terms of laps led and fast laps. You can just see it with our eyes. Austin Hill, 0.87. Again, having a good season, but not on Smith's level. We've already talked about Almirola. Jesse Love, not the best in his first Las Vegas. Definitely took steps forward here. And that's about right. I mean, if you were ranking Jesse Love based on results, not based on anything else, then that's where he is. Smith has been fine. I'm kind of surprised to see him up a little bit, but in reality, when you look, well, who is he better than? Well, it makes sense. He's better than Kligerman. Fine, yeah. And not as good as these drivers. He's better than Taylor Gray, who's only been in the ride a little bit. But boy, we're just scratching the surface with Taylor Gray. Just like TRD getting behind Corey Heim, it appears that TRD is also getting by Taylor Gray. Now, Heim is jumping into Hunt cars, whereas Taylor Gray is getting into JGR Toyotas. Been very excellent in the truck series, top 5 driver in the truck series. Dark horse candidate at the moment to win the championship. Obviously, Heim's a favorite. Majeski's in that conversation. Maybe you look at, I don't think you can go to Spire just yet, but Taylor Gray definitely has an outside chance. Still could be Tyler Ankrum, surprisingly. Or don't count on Eckes. AJ Allmendinger, a little bit better than what I expect at the moment. It's all right. But again, it's far from what Colleague was doing in the past. I say, oh, well, Heim, he's only 12th. Well, that's pretty good for a Sam Hunt racing car. That's very solid for this is a team that is considered mid-pack, top tier of the mid-pack. Well, maybe they're no longer top tier of the mid-pack. Maybe they need to be in the conversation with JGR and Junior Motorsports. Jones ultimately disappointing. What's new? Not bad here. You put a 56 basically running in the top half of the field. If you want to say from 0 to 100, so this is a top 20 car, give or take. Now, that is definitely suppressed by that 0.16 at Richmond. He could be a slot or two higher, but really not much. Is Sieg better than Jones, Heim, Allmendinger? Not really. Is his number closer to a 20th place driver? No, he's closer to a 15th place driver, but right now it reflects more of a 20th place driver because of that poor Richmond race where he got caught in the grease or oil of the Brendan Jones. Creed, really disappointing. This is just terrible. He's been not bad for his first race to be a top 20 driver. Weatherman, again, not really a surprise here. Running around 20th. Burton, you'd expect that to be a little bit higher for the Jordan Anderson car, but it is what it is. 20th place. Again, this is the top of the mid-pack, and that's about where the mid-pack is on any given race. Again, this is factoring in a lot of laps. It's not just finishing position. And so when we watch a race, what this number is telling us is we expect him to run around 19th, 20th. And I don't think anyone's going to argue with that right now. We would like to see him do better in the Anderson car, but that's not what he's doing. And Brendan Poole. So now we're kind of on the other side of the top 20, which is pretty solid for the TJM cars to be running around, 22nd. And that's where they're running, not necessarily where they're finishing. Sometimes they get better finishes, sometimes they get worse finishes, but I don't think anyone's going to argue in that mid-pack. The Tommy Joe Martin's cars are solidly in the middle, maybe slightly above the middle at times. They're definitely not the top of the mid-pack, but they have established themselves as solid race cars. Sam Mayer's a terrible season. Don't need to explain that. I mean, this kind of gives you a really good view of what we're getting from Ben Gisbergen. He's not running in the top 20. He's had some decent finishes, but he is not looking good. Now, we do need to throw an asterisk up there because a lot of times he's just out there cruising, trying to get laps and get in the groove, and he doesn't push it very often. And so if you're not maximizing your laps, which is understandable, you're not pushing it on every single lap, you're cruising through stage one, well, those laps are going to count to your ultimate statistical results. And so your number's not going to be a true reflection of what the driver can do. Williams, I think he'll get there eventually. But yeah, I think that number's about right. Parker Retzlaff, again, 0.78 at Richmond. Another reason why I like my stat a little bit better than what they've got. 16th. Actually, they're both pretty close. Another guy who strategy didn't work out very well for. Ultimately, he finished, 16th as well. And I think people are like, oh, typical Parker Retzlaff. Everybody made a big deal about him on the pole, and then he just faded. He didn't really fade, folks. I mean, he was running, oops. When we look at that number and see he had a 0.78, that means he was in the top quarter of the field. And in a 38 car field, that's around 12th place. I get it. The pole looks really cool, but for a Jordan Anderson car and Parker Retzlaff to be running in the top 12 all day is pretty impressive. Honeyman's been just about behind the top 20, not bad. Clements, All right, that should do it for those. It's a pretty long podcast already, so we're not going to break down Richmond in this one. There's no way you're still listening. So if you haven't already, please go to racefortheprize.com, get yourself access to the fancy NASCAR spreadsheet. Please leave a like, subscribe, share the videos. Blessed to have you guys around. Love you guys. Triple Light, fantastic.